I only see a couple of movies a year. Usually I try and sneak a few comedies in there. I like to laugh. I think many of you do too. And every now and then, once you see comedies over the years, certain kinds of jokes, you can literally see them coming. Like you see a man walking down a hallway or a man walking down a pair of stairs. He's carrying a bunch of boxes. And as he's walking along, you see one of the boxes gets a little jiggly and kind of starts to tip. And he starts spending all this time and attention trying to keep the boxes straight. Next thing you know, all the boxes are all over the floor or they're all over the stairwell. And you get a good laugh out of that. At least I do. But I will say this, after laughing at jokes like that for many years, of course I realized a long time ago, it's not just laughing at the man or the woman on the screen. It's laughing with them because I can see in myself things that I do that are worthy of a snicker or two. It kind of brings us back down to earth a little bit, takes us off our high horses. We can laugh at ourselves. That's a very good and healthy thing to be able to do. So even though I can be empty-handed, I can get a good laugh out of it and kind of realize I know myself a little better. I'm not this exalted person. I don't do everything perfectly. God knows that. But I will say that we have a chance just to maybe get a good laugh out of being empty-handed. Now, being empty-handed, though, isn't always something to get a good laugh out of. I mean, sometimes we're empty-handed for different kinds of reasons, more somber reasons or more serious reasons. Recently, I came across an interview. I was driving around in the car, and I heard this familiar voice being interviewed, and it was a fellow named Chris Thile. Now, you may not recognize Chris's name. You might hear him when he plays the mandolin. I heard him years ago when I used to do the dishes at home on Saturday night. After Vigil Mass, I'd make dinner, then I'm doing the dishes. And I've got public radio on. There was a show on that had music and storytelling. And he was part of the music. And he was just banging away on the mandolin. And just listening to him, he was being interviewed because he had a new album out with mandolin music. It's kind of like a niche market, Not everybody's into mandolin. But his songs were about loss and tragedy. His songs were about being recovered and found. His songs were about starting new and offering thanks and a little bit of praise too. And the interviewer kind of was listening to all of this and asked him, "Hey, Chris, that sounds a little churchy there. Are you kind of a person of faith? Is your work kind of inspired by Faith Connection?" And he said, "Well, it used to be. You see, my mom and dad were fundamentalist Christians. I used to go every Sunday. I go to the Wednesday nights too, and I could quote the Bible for you, chapter and verse." And the fellow said, "Chris, this kind of sounds like the Psalms." And I started thinking, wow, it does. King David on the roof of his palace with his mandolin or his lyre, just praying to God about the care for his people. Lord, take away the famines. Lord, protect my people. Send us the rains we need for the crops. Lord, protect my people. All those hymns filled with supplication and praise, all that worship in the Psalms. Yeah, the guy was onto something. Well, Chris was saying, these days, I'm kind of churchless. My hands are empty, but my heart is not. I've got a couple of friends who take me to coffee every now and then, and we talk God. That's my connection. I kind of stay close. I feel like I'm on there, just hanging on by my fingernails a little bit. I'm not ready to be churchy again, but I know I'll be ready someday. Wow. You don't hear that on the radio very much, do you? And it wasn't one of those Christian stations. This was public radio. Well, hey folks, throw this out. Our gospel today. Jesus is handing on a very special part of his heart to the disciples. He's telling them what's going to happen to him. He's telling them about his destiny. He's telling them how he's going to be found guilty, he's going to be crucified, he'll come back from the dead. It's a lot to take in, isn't it? What are the disciples doing on the road? Jesus hears them arguing. That night when they stopped, he asked them, "Hey, what were you arguing about?" Jesus kind of knew He wanted to see if they'd come forward. They were silent. Their hands were empty. Jesus handed them this very important part of his life and his destiny. And they put those packages aside to pick up other packages, arguing, well, Jesus is moving on. Who's going to be first among us? Who's going to be the new leader? Now, Jesus, with the disciples, is so generous. I mean, Jesus didn't scold the disciples. Instead, he sought his chance to continue teaching them. So instead of having this story in their hearts and in their hands, Jesus brings this child forward, puts his arms around the child, brings the child right in their midst. It's like he's handing the child to the disciples. And he says to them, whoever brings a little child like this in, one like this, welcomes me. Whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. It's like, hey fellas, this message I give you, hold it close. Cherish it. Don't drop it. I want you to carry this message. Just as we carry this little child. Now, disciples, what could you do with a little child? Well, you hold this child in your hand. You love the child. You feed the child. You heal the child's wounds. You're patient, understand the child. You teach the child, you share your gifts. You encourage the child. You empower the child to do more. And when you make the child walk, you walk behind him or her, and you support them. And then one day, your child's ready to walk on their own, and you let them go. There's a lot we can do when we're entrusted with a child in our hands. Hey, disciples, hold on to what I give you. How about us? Our day, our time. What's in our hands? Think of all the experiences of God's gift, sacraments, the Word, coming here, being one with Him, the ways in which we're called to love God, praise God, love one another, love the world in God's name, love the world in the name of Christ and the Spirit. All these good things that we can do. All these good things that we can hang on to. When we're called to be disciples, we're called to think about, say, who we are, how we follow Jesus. He calls us to pick up where he left off.